Hello, and a warm welcome back to another episode of TimeXtender Tuesdays. I'm Adam Rudd, one of the solution specialists here at TimeXtender, and today we're going to be diving into some of the new features of TimeXtender's REST API data source connector that have recently been released. In today's episode, we'll be using CheckWX, a free API service which provides real-time aviation data for airports across the globe. We're going to be focusing on two endpoints, station and METAR, with the objective of retrieving the latest detailed weather information for the top 100 airports into a single table. But there's going to be challenges along the way. There are over 30 individual API endpoints at this site, each of which supports only 20 input parameters per API call, which in this case are airports. And the responses from those endpoints will result in a large number of tables from each API call. Let's look at how we're going to do this. We'll start with a new time extender feature that allows us to import our endpoints directly from Swagger, which we can get from a URL, a file on our ingest server, or by copy and pasting an exported JSON file, which is what we'll be using. Next, we'll look at dynamic values, which are a way of passing information to our endpoints using either endpoint tables, which capture the raw output of API calls in tabular format, queries, which allow SQL-based values to be pulled and transformed from existing data sources, such as a modern data warehouse, and endpoint queries, a way of passing parameters dynamically using SQL scripts without the need for a data source. We'll be using this last option to feed in our list of 100 airports to these endpoints. Once we have our data, we'll use table flattening to consolidate into individual tables using TimeXtender's new drag and drop table builder, and then transfer everything to our modern data warehouse. Let's get started. The website we'll be using already has a Swagger interface with pre-configured endpoints available, and as you can see, there are quite a lot of them. Ordinarily, configuring a number of endpoints like this would take a long time, but with TimeXtender's new import feature, we can take the OpenAPI JSON that's available in this site and create a new data source connection from it. We'll go and create a new REST API, give it a name, and scroll down to the bottom to attach it to an ingest instance. Once we've done this, scrolling back up, we can see that the import Swagger is now available to us. And if we click that, we get the option to import settings from the website URL, a local file path, or a JSON. I'm going to use a JSON that I just copied, click Next, and TimeXtender will now go and discover everything it can from that website and allow us to choose the settings and configurations we want to keep. So we'll click Get Meta Decoded endpoint and the Get Station. Once we've completed our endpoint selection, we'll click Import, and TimeXtender will automatically populate the values with the fields necessary. We'll replace this with my authorization key and mark it as sensitive. And now we can see that the two endpoints that have been imported can now be configured. Now notice that in the path for the first endpoint, we have a parameter called ICAO. We want to retrieve information for 100 airports, but this API has a limitation on only 20. So I could paste 20 in at a time and then repeat this exercise 5 times over, but that's not a very efficient way of doing it. Instead, we can use dynamic values to populate these and automatically loop the request. So we'll do that using an endpoint query. And I've just written some SQL here containing all of our airport codes we want to retrieve. Notice at the end, they are called ICAO, which matches the parameter that we are looking for in this endpoint. And once that's entered, we can go ahead and test that connection. Green tick means everything is good. We'll now move to the second endpoint and repeat that, which once again has the ICAO parameter at the end. Another test to make sure all looks good. And we can add this data source. Next, we'll head over to TimeXtender data integration and refresh, which will discover our new data source and trigger the import metadata task. That's completed with some warnings. Let's go and take a look at that. And it's telling us that there are duplicate tables which we can ignore for now. We'll address those in just a second. But let's go ahead and go to our metadata manager, take a look at the structure of our endpoints. And we can see that we have a number of tables returned from those two endpoints, which we'll add to our ingest. Next, we'll go and execute a full load. And select the tables for that data source. And if I just choose one of those, we'll see we have 100 rows returned. So those dynamic values looped those API requests instead of us having to manually enter them 5 times over to get the 100 airports that we're looking for. But that's not a great way of displaying information, so we can do something else in the new REST API, and that is something called table flattening, which is a way of compressing the result set into a single table per endpoint. So let's go ahead and configure that. We'll give this a name called METAR, which is the Meteorological Aerodrome Report, and click the Table Builder button. We have 3 options here. I'm going to use JSON to populate the schema information, and then tell TimeXtender where the root of our data is and the columns that we would like retrieved as part of our query. And we'll simply drag and drop those. And in the right-hand pane, we can right-click any column and replace the values, edit them, or just delete any that we don't need. So we'll save and close this one. And do the same for our second endpoint. Again, we only want to see the flattened tables, so we click Add. This one's called Airports, and the Table Builder button again. And from XML, we'll paste that in there, get schema. And once again, we'll define where the root level is, where the data iterates, and then add the columns that we want to appear in our response. I'll just remove this duplicate column. And we'll save and close this. Save our data source. Next, we'll go back into data integration and refresh. And execute the import metadata task once again. No errors this time. That's great. That's completed successfully. And our metadata manager now shows 2 new tables have been added, airports and METAR, and all of the other columns have been deleted. So we'll just commit those changes and execute another full load of our data source. Okay, let's take a look at the tables. And now we only have 2 tables, one called airport, one called METAR, both containing 100 rows. Now, of course, once we've got that information, we can go ahead and open our prepare instance and move these two tables. Let's move this over here. Move these two tables into our modern data warehouse so that we can create relations and denormalize them. Let's go ahead and move that across here. We will then expand and create the relations between the two tables based on ICAO, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization, for anyone who's wondering. And now drag the conditional lookup fields that we want from our airport table into our METAR table using those existing relations. That's all three. And now we just deploy and execute those changes. Okay, now if I preview our METAR table, we can now see all of the information for all of the airports, the real-time weather at each location, latitude, longitude, wind speed, temperatures, clouds, and for all of the super geeks, the barometric pressure in millibars, kilopascals, hectopascals, and inches of mercury. And that's it. That is how the new TimeXtender REST API advanced features can help you consolidate results by importing directly from a Swagger UI and greatly reduce the time it takes to set up and configure REST API endpoints. We hope that you've enjoyed watching this video, and we hope you'll tune in again for another episode of TimeXtender Tuesdays. Thanks for watching.